Hi everyone. In this video I'm going to be continuing a discussion that I started this morning on how to perform mediation analysis using Andrew Hayes process macro with RStudio. So in my earlier video I demonstrated how to perform an analysis of a simple mediation model, and so we're going to extend this a bit by going into parallel mediation. So if you haven't already had a chance to look at the other video, what I will do is I'm going to include a link to it underneath the video description. It is kind of important too, not only for kind of some background information with respect to just the basic performing the mediation analysis, but I also go into how to download the process macro and open it up and activate it in RStudio. So at any rate, for the things that you're going to need to have in order to follow along with the video, make sure first RStudio is already installed. Secondly, make sure that you've opened up the macro in RStudio and activated it. And as I said before, if you've not already done so, you can see my other video where I demonstrate where to locate the R file and how to activate and use it. And so there's the video link that you see on your screen. So I had done that in the context of simple mediation. The third thing you'll need is the raw data file, which I'm going to include a link to underneath the video description. So our current data set is actually saved in an Excel file. So we will be importing that Excel file into RStudio before we carry out our analysis. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at our conceptual model. So in this model you can see that we have this mastery goals variable serving as our antecedent variable and achievement serving as our outcome variable. And so in a nutshell, we're trying to predict variation and achievement as a function of mastery, but we're considering two different routes, or maybe three different routes if you want to think about it that way, by which mastery may impact achievement. So the first route is through a mediation path through the interest mediator. So as in a nutshell, we're proposing that mastery impacts interest and interest impacts achievement. So we're proposing that the effect of mastery on achievement is at least partially mediated by the interest variable. And so we can calculate the specific indirect effect of mastery on achievement as a product of paths A1 and B1 right here. The second route has mastery impacting achievement by way of the mediator anxiety. And so we can calculate that specific indirect effect by taking the product of paths A2 and B2 that you see right here. And then that third route I was kind of hinting at is a direct route where we have the effect of mastery on achievement partially being direct right here. And so that's this C prime path that you see right here. And we might think about C prime as basically, unmodeled possible mediators between mastery goals and student achievement. So now let's take a quick look at our statistical model. We're going to break down this conceptual model that you see here into three separate linear regressions, and this is where we are computing our regression coefficients. So you can see the first model is a simple linear regression where we have mastery goals predicting our mediator interest. So that's where we are estimating the A1 path that you see right here. We have a second simple regression where mastery goals is predicting the anxiety variable, and that's where we are estimating the A2 path that you see here. And then we have a multiple regression where we have both of our mediators along with our antecedent mastery goals predicting student achievement right here, and so that allows us then to estimate paths B1, B2, and C prime within our model. So here we are in RStudio, and I've already activated the macro. You'll see in the window above where I'd highlighted everything, I just clicked on select all and then pressed run, and it basically activated the macro, and it took a few minutes, or at least a couple of minutes, in order to get it to go. So all of that processing has gone on up here, and now it's ready to go. It just says down here, it says process is now ready for use. As I said before, I cover all of these details in the previous videos. So again, be sure to check that out if you're not if you don't really understand how I've got to where I'm at. So now let's go ahead and import our data. So I'm going to click on File, go to Import Data Set, and our data file is contained in an Excel file. So we're going to click on From Excel, and we're going to click on Browse and go to our folder on our computer, and then select the file. So here we are. We've selected regression data. This is my Excel file right here, and I'm going to click on Open, and then we'll click on Import, and so now the file has been imported into RStudio. So one thing to take note of is that right here in this part of the syntax that was generated, this is essentially a command that is reading the Excel file into a data object, or an object in R, called regression underscore data. So it's basically kind of a derivative of the original file name, which was regression data with a space in between. So this object is basically a data frame with our data, and if we wanted to take a quick look at it, we can just type in str and then regression underscore data and enter, and so you can see kind of an explanation of what each of the variables are in terms of their characteristics. So you can see all of them are numeric. This first one up here, by the way, is just a subject identifier, so it's pretty much irrelevant for our purposes, but the variables that we are working with will include the achievement, mastery, interest, anxiety variables, and so forth. So at any rate, because we've activated the process macro and because we've imported our data, we're ready to go with respect to using our the macro in order to run our analysis. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out by typing in process, and inside the parenthesis we'll type in data. So that's an argument set equal to the name of the data frame, which the name of the data frame is regression underscore data. So we have to refer to that data frame if we're going to have process be able to find our variables and so forth. So now we'll type comma, and then we will type in y equals, and inside quotation marks we're going to type the name of our outcome variable, which is achieve. Now it's really important when you start typing in the variable names and so forth that you type it in exactly as it appears in the data frame. R is very, very picky when it comes to upper and lowercase letters and so forth. So if you don't type it in, if you accidentally type in cap when it should be a lowercase letter, then you're going to have problems with the analysis being carried out. So just keep that in mind as we proceed. So next we'll type in comma and then x equals, and then the name of our antecedent variable, which is mastery, again inside quotation marks. Then we'll type comma and then m equals, and then because we have two proposed mediators, we have to use our list function here in R. So we're going to type in C, and inside parenthesis here we're going to type in the names of our two proposed mediators inside quotation marks and separated by a comma. So I'm going to type in the first set of quotation marks, interest in quotation marks, comma, then anxiety in quotation marks in parenthesis, and now we're going to go through and we're going to add in model equals 4 because we're using Hayes's process template number 4 in order to run our mediation analysis. So next we'll type comma, and we will type describe equals 1 comma, stand equals 1, comma, and then contrast equals 1. Now these last three are basically options. So describe, setting that equal to 1 will generate descriptive statistics for our variables. Stand, set equal to 1, is going to generate standardized regression coefficients. And then contrast equals 1 can be used if we want to compare or basically contrast the specific indirect effects, like if we wanted to test whether there's a significant difference in the indirect effects of anxiety and interest. So now we're ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and press enter, and now we've got our analysis, and it's still running, by the way. You can see it's using a bootstrap process. It's generating 5,000 bootstrap samples, and the reason why is because those bootstrap resampling is used to create confidence intervals so that we can test those indirect effects. So we're going to go ahead and scroll up just a bit here to take a look at everything. So you can see it says model number 4, and we've got our y variable, our x variable right here, our two mediators right here. There's our sample size, and then in the next section you can see that we've got the descriptives in the form of mean, standard deviations, and correlations. When we scroll down, you can see that we have the first simple regression model. So this is where interest was regressed onto the mastery variable right here. So we have the unstandardized regression slope, standard error, t-value, p-value, and even a 95% confidence interval over here. The constant, is, by the way, is just referring to the intercept within this particular model. So as you can see, mastery goals, the unstandardized coefficient is 0.7701, so it's positive, which is what we would expect, right? We would expect that mastery goals would be a significant positive predictor of interest. So we do see that there's a positive predictive relationship. And then when we look at the p-value over here, you can see that we have statistical significance with respect to that regression slope. You can also see down below we've got our standardized coefficient. Again, if that's what you want, you just set that stand argument equal to 1 when you're typing in the code. So we see that mastery goals is a significant positive predictor of interest. When we scroll down, we have our next simple regression model. So we have anxiety regressed onto mastery goals. And you can see right here, there's our R-square, F-test, and so forth. There's a significance level for the F-test. All of these things that you would typically see in the context of a regression analysis. You have, again, there's our intercept for the model. And then here's the unstandardized regression slope for mastery on anxiety. So you can see that the slope is negative 0.3992. So that's telling us that higher scores on mastery goals are associated with lower scores on anxiety. And you can see too that this relationship is statistically significant. So basically mastery has emerged as a significant negative predictor of anxiety. So now we have basically our A1 and A2 coefficients that have been computed. Oh, and by the way, just with that last one, you can see there's the standardized coefficient as well for mastery on anxiety. So again, we have the A1, A2 coefficient. So then when we scroll down, we get to our multiple regression model where we have achievement that was regressed onto mastery, interest, and anxiety. So this the coefficients that you see right here, this coefficient is the C prime coefficient. It's a little bit hard to write in there. Then we have the B1 coefficient right there for interest, and then the B2 coefficient right here for anxiety. So you can see that with respect to the direct effect of mastery on achievement, that's still positive and statistically significant. With respect to the direct effect of interest on achievement, you can see it's positive and we have statistical significance. And then with respect to the direct effect of anxiety on achievement, it's a negative coefficient, but it is not statistically significant. So when we scroll down a little bit further, once again we have our standardized coefficients, that are provided right in this little area right here. Well, it's a little hard to highlight it, but there it is, right there. So then we have our indirect effects within the model. So because we had requested standardized coefficients, we also get, in addition to the unstandardized indirect effects, which are located in this area, we have the standardized indirect effects, which are located in this area below. So as you're looking at this, you'll notice that we have in this row of output for total, we have the total indirect effect of mastery goals on achievement. So that's our total indirect effect, which is actually going to be the sum of our specific indirect effects below. And so you can see there's a positive total indirect effect of mastery on achievement, and we can test for statistical significance by comparing a null of 0 to this confidence interval. So we have the lower bound and the upper bound, and if 0 falls outside of the lower and the upper bound, then we would determine that the indirect effect is statistically significant. So that would be the case with respect to the total indirect effect. In terms of the specific indirect effects, there's the specific indirect effect of interest, or the specific indirect effect as mediated through interest, is 0.1625, and you can see that 0 does not fall between the lower and the upper bound, so we would determine that effect to be significant. And then with respect to anxiety, we have a positive indirect effect of mastery goals through on achievement through anxiety, but you'll notice that 0 falls between the upper and lower bounds that you see right here. So in that case, we would deem that not significant. So when you scroll down a little bit further, you can also see that we have this little C1 right here, and its reference, a little key for it, is given down here. So this is a comparison. It's basically interest in the indirect effect of mastery goals on achievement by way of interest, that indirect effect minus the indirect effect through the mediator anxieties. So this is essentially a comparison of the specific indirect effects that you see right here. So it's just basically the first indirect effect minus the second indirect effect gets us this difference right here, and we can test that difference out using the same logic that we were using previously. So you can see that 0 does not fall between the lower and the upper bound, so we would determine that there is a significant difference in terms of the indirect effects of mastery goals on achievement by way of interest and anxiety. In the output below, we have essentially the same reasoning process at play, but again using standardized indirect effects instead of unstandardized indirect effects. Okay, one other thing that I want to show you is basically how to add in covariates into our model. So if we go back up and just take a quick look at our syntax, again we have process, inside the parenthesis data equals regression underscore data, again referencing our data frame, comma, y equals quotation marks achieve and quotation marks, comma, x equals mastery inside quotation marks, and then we have our mediators given right here. So m equals c for our list function, and inside the parenthesis we have our quotation marks. We have our proposed mediators inside quotation marks and separated by the comma. So I'm going to take this information, we're going to basically just kind of paste it down here at the bottom and continue on. I'm going to add in a comma right here, and we're going to add in two covariates to our analysis. So we're going to add in gender ID variable, and then we're also going to add in performance goals, which is the PERFGOAL that you see on your screen. So in this case, what we're going to do is type in COV. So this is a new argument that we're adding in, and we're going to say equals C, and inside our parentheses, we're going to add in the covariates inside quotation marks, and again separated by a comma. So again, we're using the list function as we did previously. So in this case, I'm going to type in PERFGOAL end quotation marks there, comma, and then gender ID, end quotation marks, and now we're done with entering our covariate, so we'll have in parenthesis, comma, model equals 4, comma, describe equals 1, comma, stand equals 1, comma, and we can add in that contrast as well. So we'll say contrast equals 1 and in parenthesis there. So now when we hit enter, we get our output, and so now we have our control variables in each of the regressions, and then obviously the indirect effects are going to be adjusted for those covariates that have been included in the model. So again, it's kind of scrolling back up. You can see it says model 4 again with our variables, and then you can see down here it says covariates, performance goals, and gender ID. When we scroll down, we get our descriptives as before. Scroll down a little bit further, and now you can see there's the R-square for a regression model where interest has been regressed onto not only mastery but also the two control variables, performance goals and gender ID right there. So again, this is still our A1 path, but now it's adjusted for the presence of those covariates within our model. When we scroll down a little bit further, you can see we've got anxiety regressed onto mastery, performance goals, and gender ID. So once again, this is still path A2 right here, but again, controlling for performance goals and gender ID. And so, basically with both of those, A1 and A2, both of those are statistically significant as we look at our p-values for those. We'll scroll down further, and now we have achievement regressed onto our two mediators, our antecedent variable right there, mastery goals, and then we also are regressing onto those control variables as you see right there. So in this particular case, you can see that the B1 path from interest to achievement is still positive and significant. The B2 path from anxiety to achievement is still negative and non-significant, and the direct effect of mastery on achievement is still positive and significant even after we control for these two other variables. When we scroll down a little bit further, you can see that the basic conclusions that we had come to previously held up even after we included those two covariates within our model. So that's basically all there is to it when it comes to running an analysis where you're testing for parallel mediation using the process macro with RStudio. So I'm going to conclude this video presentation, and I appreciate you watching.